Near my in-laws' cabin, there's an ice cream shop, and it's right next to the lake. And it's a favorite destination for us and our kids is making a trip or two to the ice cream shop. Now, if you think about it, some of you maybe experienced this. The sun is shining, you're sitting there beside a lake, and you've got a tiger-flavored hard ice cream cone in your hand. What can go wrong? It's perfect, right? What could go wrong in those moments? Well, blame often lies in two people. Part of the blame should lie in the person who welds the ball of ice cream to the cone. Maybe there's not enough pressure. Blame should also lie in the customer who is maybe a little bit irresponsible with this top-heavy treat as well. And you might think of me as being cold and uncaring, but when I say that, I'm amused in those moments when the ice cream cone escapes from its circular seat there and falls to the ground. But lest you think I'm just vicious, it's probably partly because I have an intact ice cream cone that I'm enjoying. But my curiosity is in how the response comes at that loss. What's the response in that loss? Not the loss itself. I don't take some sort of, morbid, joy out of seeing someone's pain. But I like to watch how my children respond when something like that happens, when the ice cream cone falls to the ground. And sometimes the reaction, sometimes the response is one of just silent tears and pleading for another chance. They don't even have to say anything. There's just this, and you know the sight, just sort of tears and this puppy dog, this look of pleading for one more chance. Sometimes we encounter the practicality of sort of just grabbing the ice cream cone or ice cream and brushing it off as best as possible and putting it back on there, right? The 3-second rule, 5-second rule, whatever it is. But more often than not, the loss seems to trigger the end of the world. More often than not, that's the reaction. Despair. There's this weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth and this sort of shaking their fist at anything they can see. It's God, it's the ice cream cone, it's the parents, it's your sister that made you do it, and the whole shebang. There's just utter unfairness at the loss. Now, these reactions might seem humorous to us, but I think they are because they're so common. We've been there, whether or not it's with an ice cream cone or something else. We felt that loss or similar loss. In fact, many of you have experienced loss much greater than a dumped ice cream cone, haven't you? Many of us will experience loss much greater than a dumped ice cream cone as well. And how will we respond? How do you respond when you experience loss in your life? And that's what we're going to look at this morning. Maybe you experience it, maybe you respond sort of silently. You sort of retreat and pull back. Maybe you respond by putting a mask on, putting a face on. Maybe you complain and rail against life, against God, and those around you. Well, this morning we're going to look at how to respond when we encounter loss. We're beginning a short book, series in Ruth, a sermon series in Ruth, and it's a story of loss and of gain. It's a story of emptiness and of fullness. And it's a story of despair and one of hope as well. And we'll be taking it one chapter at a time. And so we'll look at the first chapter this morning. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. They went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. And after they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died. And Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept out loud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me." At this they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. The book of Ruth begins on a rather ominous note. And it's one that, in the very first phrase of the first sentence, "in the days when the judges ruled." Literally, in Hebrew, it's "in the days when the judges judged." And we're, as you read, you'll notice that this short story takes place at a time in the previous book in your Bibles. And as you read Judges, you'll see that this is not the most pleasant time in Israel's history, is it? There's this sort of downward spiral of sin, violence, and immorality. And it's sort of circular in the ways it works in Judges. The people sin against God, and they stop trusting him as they turn to the gods of their neighbors. And lots of times they're oppressed, and they're put under oppression or they're into slavery of these other neighbors that are around them. But in the midst of that, they cry out. In their pain and their loss, in the midst of that horrible situation, they cry out to God in repentance, and God hears them. And what he does is he sends a judge, a leader, to come and rescue them from that. And as they obey that leader, he rescues him out of that situation for a time, for a short period of time, until they forget God again. So the time of Judges is not only a time of a sort of downward descent of sin and immorality and violence, but it's also a sporadic time of heroes, of mighty battles, of miracles. And we think of Samson, and we think of Gideon, and we think of Deborah. And so we have these sort of heroes that come in who rescue them, and miracles from God. And we might think this as being normative, as being something that happens to everybody. That this is what it looks like when we read Judges, if not for the book of Ruth. And Ruth is so beautiful in part because it's a story about very ordinary people in very ordinary circumstances, very ordinary events. Maybe you've read the Old Testament and and even the New Testament, and you wonder, what's wrong with me? Why don't I hear the audible voice of God? Why don't I see miracles happening? Why don't I have visions, perhaps, that we read of? Well, Ruth is a good example of trusting God in your everyday walk. What it looks like to trust God each day, especially when he often seems hidden. Now, the story of Ruth centers around one woman, right? And it's Naomi. Even though we call the book Ruth, Naomi is the character that's there longer at the beginning and longer at the end. Ruth pops in, and she has a very important part. Boaz pops in. There's characters that come in, but Ruth is consistent, or Naomi is consistent throughout. And Naomi's name seems to come from a Hebrew verb named nahom, which means to be pleasant. To be pleasant. And then you add that E ending, you change it to my pleasantness. And so Naomi is named my pleasantness. Maybe her parents were thinking of God, how God would look on this child and say, this is my pleasantness in this child. And so the first couple verses of Naomi's life are quite pleasant, aren't they? She has a husband, she has 2 sons, and they're from Bethlehem. That's great. So far, so good. Now there's a famine in the land near Bethlehem, and so the family moves to the country of Moab. This is the Dead Sea right here, and the Jordan River, and we have the Sea of Galilee. And right here, that black dot there is Bethlehem. And so there's a famine in the land. And so the family decides to move to Bethlehem, or to move to Moab. And Moab is right over here on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. And so they move over to Moab and hope to find some food. Now what's ironic here is that Bethlehem in Hebrew is made up of 2 words, Bet Lehem, house of bread. What's ironic here is that this house of bread cannot feed this family. And so they leave and they go to Moab for a time. Then tragedy strikes and Elimelech dies. But Naomi, she still has her boys. She still has the hope of a future. And while they're there in Moab, each of them find a nice Moabite girl to marry. And things seem to be all right for a time. Until tragedy strikes again and both her boys die. Naomi's loss is tremendous. In the space of around 10 years, she's lost both her husband and both her sons. In just a 10-year period of window. It's horrible. In fact, in Israel, her family line, Elimelech's family line, is about to die out. She has no children to carry it on. And in Israel, there's no greater tragedy than a family line ceasing to exist, being cut off. But how does Naomi respond to her loss? That's what we want to look at this morning. Well, she hears that famine in Judah is over, so she starts to leave for home, and then she tries to convince her daughters-in-law to go back to Moab, right? To return to their people and their God. But they say no, they're sort of obstinate, no. And look at her response in verse 11. Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me." We start to get a sense for how Naomi is feeling, how she's dealing with what's happening, what's going on, a picture of her heart. It's more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. Well, Orpah goes back. But Ruth stays with Naomi. And as they return to Bethlehem, we again see where Naomi's heart is at. Look at verse 19 to 21. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. The women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." In her reply to the women at the town of Bethlehem, we can see what Naomi is focusing on, can't we? Naomi is focusing on what she doesn't have. She only sees what she's lost. And she's lost a lot, right? She's lost a tremendous amount. But she can only see what she's lost. And what has she lost? Well, she's lost a husband. She's lost 2 boys. But not only that, we see in her comments that in her mind too, she also feels that she's lost an ally in the Lord. An ally in the Lord. This God whom she believes in, this covenant God, who she believes in, who she thought was for her, is now against her. And we see that in verse 13, right? Because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. In verse 20, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. And then verse 21, but the Lord has brought me back empty. The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. And as Naomi focuses on what she's lost, what she no longer has, she becomes bitter. She becomes bitter. Don't call me, she says, don't call me pleasant, my pleasantness. Call me Mara, call me bitter. Look at what I've lost. How many of you have found yourselves talking like Naomi? This is what life can do to you. It can leave you bitter. This is what life can do to you. It can leave us talking like Naomi, can't it? I don't pretend to understand how a mother feels at the loss of an unborn child. But I remember getting a call from Britt while at youth group one night. Some of you have lost children. Some of you have lost a spouse, a sibling. Many of you have lost parents. There are 16 families in Canada who are dealing with this right now, who are wrestling with this. And in their loss, in our own loss, our emptiness, it's so easy to become bitter. A bitterness directed at God. How could he allow it? Why would he? And sometimes, like Naomi, we're quick to implicate God into our tragedy. We're quick to pull him in and say, God, you caused this. Right? Bitterness. But Naomi's loss is not all that she can see. It might be all that she can see, but is it all that we find in the book of Ruth? And I don't think so. Naomi fails to see what she does have. You notice that? Naomi fails to see what she has. She can see God's role in what he's taken from her, but she can't see his role in what he's provided her, in what he's given to her. But we, the readers, can, or we're supposed to. We're supposed to. Look at verse 6. When she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. The Lord comes to the aid of his people by providing food for them. It's a figure of speech here. He probably provided rain so the drought would end, the famine would end, and there would be crops again. He provides food for them. And this is something that Yahweh is good at. It's something that the covenant God of Israel has done in the past, provided food for his people. Whether it's with manna, whether it's with quail, reproducing things. This is an act of God and something that he's concerned with. He will provide food for his people. He's been known to do that. And specifically to those who are vulnerable. In Deuteronomy 10, verse 18, we read, he defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the alien, the foreigner, giving him food and clothing. This is who this God is. He provides for his people. He cares about the fatherless, daughters without husbands. He cares for the widows, wives without husbands. This is who he is. But still, Naomi is unable to see the Lord's provision in her life. She's unable to see the Lord's faithfulness in her life. But there's more than food that God has provided her, isn't there? Naomi has also gained a faithful and loving daughter in Ruth. A faithful and loving daughter. Look at verse 14. At this they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clung to her. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. These are some of the most beautiful words in all of Scripture. Orpah does what's expected. Orpah does what's reasonable and what most of us should do, and maybe what we would advise them to do. They have no future in Judah. There's nothing there. They have no money. They're foreigners. And as much as the God of Israel cares about foreigners, often his people didn't. No money, they're foreigners, and they'd probably go to Judah and just be taken advantage of. The wise choice, the safe choice, the good choice is going back to Moab, back to their families, and back to the land of their birth. So Orpah, understandably, goes back home. But Ruth, what does she do? I love these words. She clings to Naomi. In verse 14, but Ruth clung to her. She shows hesed, which is a Hebrew term that maybe your Bibles define as kindness in verse 8. But throughout Scripture, this hesed is reminiscent of a faithful love, of a steadfast love, of a sacrificial love. And it's a love that's described of Yahweh to his people, of God towards his people, that he's a faithful and loving Father, faithful and loving God. And she shows this to Naomi. She reflects this attribute of God to Naomi, this sacrificial love. This is how God acts towards his people. And here Ruth shows it to Naomi. And it's not a light commitment. I'm not sure if you picked it up there. It's not light. It's a costly love. Ruth chooses a new land, a new people, a new family. And most importantly, she chooses a new God as well, Yahweh. And this is a commitment that's reminiscent, if we think back to the calls of discipleship we read in Mark, isn't it? Leaving all behind and following God. Albeit here, much more eloquently, perhaps. Ruth chooses a new land and a new people and a new God. And in all of this, we see quite easily that the Lord is not against Naomi, is he? He's not against her. He's provided food for her again in Judah. He's provided a daughter for her, a loving daughter in Ruth, a daughter who loves her sacrificially. And look at Naomi's response in verse 18. After this, in verse 18, when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. We have these amazingly beautiful words of commitment. And it's as if Naomi sort of shrugs and says, okay, you can come, right? Okay, fine, come along. And then we have those words of Naomi in Bethlehem in response to the women in Bethlehem. In verses 20 and 21, don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. I went away full. Did you get that? I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Isn't this a little ironic with Ruth standing right next to her? It's clinging to her. Listen, bitterness blinds you. Bitterness blinds you. This is the tragedy of bitterness. That bitterness blinds us to all that is good around us. It blinds us. In Naomi's response, it shows how self-centered, how self-absorbed her grief had made her. That she had been ignoring, that she could ignore a faithful daughter standing right next to her, clinging to her. Someone she didn't have when she initially left Judah, by the way. No. So how has bitterness blinded you? How has bitterness blinded you? Maybe in those tragic moments of loss. Bitterness has blinded you from the love of God. Maybe from the love of those around you, from the people right next to you, even from those who are clinging to you, who are trying to support you, who are trying to love you. I've seen this in a family who lost a small child, and it was tragic. It was tragic. The comfort of bitterness that slowly alienated and drove people away. People who are trying to love them and pushing away any sort of love and care shown to them. But I've also seen the opposite in a family who's lost a small child as well. A couple who mourned openly and honestly, but without bitterness, who were able, by God's grace, to keep their eyes open and their hearts thankful in the midst of their grief, in the midst of their pain. So beware of bitterness. Beware of bitterness. In this opening chapter, we still see life as it is today. This isn't something that's removed by thousands and thousands of years, that we no longer experience this today. Something that we experience each day, every day. We see the fullness of life, and we see the emptiness of it. We hear the voice of one struggling with bitterness and complaint. We also hear the voice of one who is faithful and confident in what God has given them. And behind it all, what's amazing about the book of Ruth, behind it all, God is at work. God is at work behind it. We get a sense here and there. He's not a main character. He's not someone who's stepping in on the scene, but he's at work. And the narrator will show us that as we read the word. It's not coincidence what goes on in this book. In fact, the chapter ends with a little bit of a wink and a nudge at the end of chapter 1 in verse 22. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. See, God is at work. God is at work. Something's coming. The barley harvest is about to begin. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to Naomi in the midst of her bitterness here? But in this chapter and throughout this book, we'll encounter how God normally works in our world. How he normally works in our world. Sure, there's moments of great intervention where God comes down and he miraculously heals someone. He intervenes in someone's life. And that happens, and it's good, and we should praise God for that. For sure. But most normally, more often, he works in the everyday actions of faithful people. The everyday actions of faithful people who seek to bring him glory. That's how God works around us. It's through you. It's through me in the lives of others. Perhaps you're bitter this morning. Life has been unfair. Or better, God has been unfair. He's been unfair to you. You've lost so much. Don't let your bitterness blind you. Don't let your bitterness blind you to a God who loves you. Don't let your bitterness blind you just as Naomi's bitterness blinded her. As Naomi's bitterness caused her to be blinded to Ruth's love for her, don't let your bitterness blind you from God's love for you. First and foremost, in his love shown to you in the sending of his Son on the cross to die for your sins. But also, don't let your bitterness blind you to his sustaining work in your life. This is so important. Don't let his bitterness blind you to his provision in your life. In daily, simple food on your table. And in loyal friends around you. Do you have food to eat? Praise God. Praise God. Do you have friends and family? Thank the Lord. Thank the Lord. Praise God for those things. Don't let bitterness blind you. And if you're not struggling with bitterness, and many of us hopefully aren't struggling with bitterness in this moment. If you're not, we're reminded of how to serve those who are, aren't we? We're reminded of what it looks like and how we're supposed to come alongside someone. And the way we do that is with faithful love. Being present, being there. A love that is present. A love that sticks it out when someone is going through this, right? We see that in Ruth. A love that clings to someone when they're struggling with loss. May this characterize each of us as we seek to follow God. May this characterize each of us as we encounter pain and loss in the lives of others. And we're going to go out this next week. And I guarantee you, some of you will encounter that. Maybe not in your own life, but you'll encounter people struggling with pain and loss. And more often than not, you're going to find someone who's bitter. Whether it's with God, whether it's with circumstance, whether it's with karma, whatever it is, you'll find people that are bitter. And may this characterize us. May we be characterized by the love of God. That is a faithful love. It's not a love that comes to them necessarily with, this is what you need to believe, but a love that holds them. A love that holds them. A love that sticks it out with them. May this characterize us as a church as well. Us as a corporate body. May this characterize us that we don't flee when the going gets tough. When things sort of get uncomfortable. That we would stick it out as a church. That we would show the love of God. Show the love of God who is near to the broken and the downhearted. Let's pray. Father, we praise you that you are a God who loves us. We thank you so much that you are a God who provides for us each day in simple food on our tables, in the fellowship of family and friends around us, God. Create within us by your Spirit a spirit of thankfulness that drives out the root bitterness, God. And I pray that as we encounter people in grief, as we encounter loss ourselves, God, that we would be there for others, that we would cling to them, that we would hold on to them, that we would affirm them, that we would stick it out with them, God. I pray for those who are struggling with loss, who are bitter this morning, God. We pray that you would break through in their lives, enable them to see your provision for them, first in your Son's death on the cross for their sins, and next in the body of the church, reaching out, living and loving them, God, today. And God, I pray that as we encounter, you would give us strength, God, not to choose the easy way out and go back. Not to choose to sort of back out and take the path that is more common, more understandable, maybe even safer, God. I pray that by your Spirit, we be committed to those who are in pain, who are hurting, God. And give us the strength of your Spirit to stay with them and to live out that love, that faithful love, that sacrificial love that you have shown us. We praise you, God, that you have done that first in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.